The Wrath of the Lich King pre-patch in 2008 has to be one of, if not the most memorable pre-patch events to have occurred in World of Warcraft history. It was originally planned to be a 3-week event in the lead up to the new expansion launch, a dramatic entrance for the Lich King onto the stage of Azeroth and a show of power for the Scourge. It released some items which are now owned by very few players to this day on retail, such as the Arcanite Ripper or the Blessed Battle Gear of Undead Slaying, which you'll probably recognise as the tier 2 purple recolor, but it's not the rewards I want to focus on today. However, maybe we can do that in a video a bit closer to launch. It's the actual event itself. What happened, how players reacted to it in 2008, and why it's gone down in the history books of WoW. This is the story of the second Scourge invasion, and arguably the most chaotically intentional feature the World of Warcraft devs have ever put in the game. It began on the 23rd of October 2008. Day one of what would, in a very short space of time, ruin nearly all of Azeroth. Expansion launch was at fever pitch with 3 weeks left until we went to Northrend, played DKs, and got to live out stories back from the times of Warcraft 3. Phase 1 of the event was simple. Crates, some innocuous, seemingly harmless crates just appearing in Booty Bay, though with sinister intent. The grain contained within had been marked by the Scourge. Those affected were susceptible to the zombie plague, which after a period of time would turn you into a zombie controlled by the player, and these zombies were shockingly effective at spreading the plague. Initially it started as a debuff that timed down, and if it wasn't removed you would turn into a zombie until death. Their abilities were pretty simple. Mangle, which was an extra melee hit, but the dangerous part is it decreased the remaining timer before the enemy became a zombie. With many players at once you could essentially insta-zombify somebody. Retch, an AoE zone that slowed and infected enemies whilst healing zombies. Beckoning Groan to call nearby zombie NPCs to you. Lurch, an AoE CC removal and move speed increase for all nearby zombies. This was practically a perma buff eventually and made it really hard to get away on foot. And perhaps most deadly of all, Zombie Explosion, which, yeah, you guessed it, you go boom, others around you get infected. Oh, and zombies were way ahead of their time, you know. It was the first real cross-faction event in the game. They were treated like a third faction. Any zombie could speak to anyone else. You can, for example, become a zombie as an Alliance player in Shatrath and then take the portal to Orgrimmar. All Scourge mobs are now friendly to you, and you were able to open some gates in Strat without needing any keys, and just a lot more fun stuff. Quite a bit of extra effort was put into making the event special. Argent Healer NPCs also started making appearances in major cities, saying the Lich King is attempting to make his presence known, we must not let this occur. Though the plague at this stage was tame compared to what would happen in the days to come. It took 10 minutes for the transformation to happen, and one cure disease spell would get rid of it. The Argent Healers could also cleanse it. Phase 2, October 24th. Those crates from Booty Bay had now made their way to capital cities in Azeroth. Plagued critters such as roaches roam the streets in numbers, and players who were too close to them upon their death would become infected with the plague. The plague was growing in strength, yet the forces of Azeroth were still in control at this point, and it wasn't too difficult to handle. That was going to change very fast. Phase 3 happened on October 25th. Plagued residents begin appearing outside lower level zones, attacking other mobs and players at random, spreading chaos throughout the open world. Time from affliction to zombification had been lowered from 10 minutes to 5, and player attempts to dispel the debuff now gradually became harder, with it sometimes taking up to 5 attempts to cleanse it. On top of this, Argent Healers and Capitals began mysteriously disappearing from their posts. During this time, zombie power was increased with higher health pools and more damage. Phase 4 happened on October 25th at 9 PM server time. This is when the plague really took over, as well as notable world events becoming available, with a host of new quests, vendors, and additional limited time raid bosses like Tenris Mirkblood and Karazhan. The major cities of Azeroth by this point in time went to a total standstill. It was quite literally impossible to go anywhere near them without becoming a zombie. The plague residents that were just being a nuisance outside capitals now began to aggro guards and infect them with an even more dangerous version of the plague that turned them in only 1 minute. Plague vermin began to appear inside city walls, foul creatures infected from eating the grain. Whilst the roaches were bad before, they didn't aggro the guards. Guess what? The vermin do, and they turn them into zombies. Treat it as there are no guards anymore, there's just zombies. A lot of zombies. The plague on players' duration before turning was lowered from 5 minutes to just 2, and huge Scourge necropoli began to appear outside city walls, floating ominously close loose as chaos unfurled on the streets. These launched targeted attacks that players had to make an effort to repel, sort of like the classic version of the invasion if you remember that. Zombies around these areas dropped a haunted memento, and whilst it's in your inventory, a Scourge haunt will follow you around. Phase 5 happened on October 26, 6 PM server time. By this point in the game, there just weren't any major cities anymore. There were just places where zombies existed. There was effectively no escape from the plague any longer. Everywhere was complete chaos. On this day, the incubation period for the plague on players was lowered from 2 minutes to 1. The Argent healers who had been making an effort to stem the plague had nearly all but vanished from cities. Residents and vermin plagued the guards, and player efforts to dispel the plague were becoming much less effective. Zombies also became even stronger, getting more damage buffs. And then on the dawn of October 27th, efforts to find a cure really started to begin, with new quests that Horde players could pick up in Shatrath, whilst Alliance players gained stronger tools to fight back the Scourge. Phase 6, starting 27th of October at midday, would see the end of the event. A cure had been found for the disease, and infestations ceased to happen. Plagued residents, vermin and roaches also began to disappear, and players returned to major cities once again. Though the invasion itself still continued, this by many was seen as the end of the major event for the Wrath of the Lich King pre-patch. So much happened over those 4.5 days that will always be remembered. It wasn't the end of the full-on invasion though. Sometime later on the 10th of November, a second wave of Scourge hit the major cities, with frostworms and abominations invading the Valley of Honor in Orgrimmar, as well as Stormwind Harbour. There was also a little bit of RP for both factions. Alliance leaders are found in Stormwind Harbour discussing their plans and what it's going to take to defeat the Scourge. Horde has the more interesting event though, where basically Garrosh isn't happy about Thrall's lack of action and says 1v1 me bro, and well, you'll find out who wins that, won't you? At the end it's agreed they will travel to Northrend, which Sylvanas is very happy about. And that is the Wrath of the Lich King pre-patch and the second Scourge invasion in a nutshell. The zombie part is short, but it is just going to be absolutely crazy on classic servers. I want you to consider the population of your server on ironforge.pro right now. We're midway through TBC, it's a good time for catch-up gearing, but not a huge amount going on in general. Now imagine how many players there will be in the pre-patch for Wrath. I don't think I have to tell you, but the game is not going to be playable for those 4 days if Blizzard goes full out to recreate the plague. I'm talking, if you are raiding around those days, make sure you have everything you need in advance, because you are not getting anywhere near an auction house without becoming a zombie. In fact, back in 2008, it was speculated the event was too disruptive and that Blizzard cut it short because it became rather apparent that having capital cities off limits was not a good thing for the game. So I had to find out whether that was true, so I did a bit of digging on the internet. I found this post from community manager Zarum in response to a player asserting the event ended early. He says, "You can't say it was cut short enough to make it true. It ran its course exactly as planned prior to the aesthetic frostworm attacks. So I guess the event went as planned. It doesn't really indicate whether or not it ended early though." Here's another post by Tigol, or as you may know him, Jeff Kaplan. This is the official blue post to mark the end of the zombie invasion, and it reads like something from a truly different era of the game ran by different people. I think you'll like this. "We'd like to thank our players for participating so zealously and valiantly during the Great Plague of 08. Our intention with this event was to create something memorable and to literally change the face of Azeroth for a few days. While we recognize the event could prove disruptive at times, we hope you made the most out of it while it lasted. Part of playing a living and breathing world means that things are going to change from time to time. We meant no harm, but only wanted to create a lasting impression on players as they head to Northrend to defeat the Lich King." And I think they succeeded in their goal there, though he does also mention in the post quite explicitly that there is more to come from the event. Personally, I feel as though they probably wanted the event to last a little bit longer. The cure was found midday on day 4. You'd think there'd be some kind of notice as though this was to be the final day, one final evening of chaos before back to normal. And these grand game-changing events don't really tend to be a thing anymore. The past few expansion pre-patches have been, there's some stuff here, go kill it. In fact, if I think about it, that's been the majority of pre-patches in general. Still, the zombie invasion stands out among them, a big gesture to hype up the game and get people talking and making memories. I can't wait to see the forums on Classic by, say, day 2 of the invasion. It's going to be like going in a time machine, I can tell you right now. I'm looking forwards to it. It's only 4 days after all. Have some fun with it. That's all. Let me know if you have any experiences from back in the day and how it was for you. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in. I will see you on the next one very soon.